SA Brains, the Rev James original.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. One here today from Wales, which makes a change from Bavaria. This is the Rev James original, and this is from the SA Brains Brewery. Now, this beer has got a reasonably interesting history, as have Brains, and I've reviewed a couple of Brains beers on the channel. The Dark Mild was the last one I did. Not sure whether you've seen that. If you haven't, do a search, have a look up on the channel, get a bit of info about the brewery. If you can't be asked, or you want to get a history of the brewery and you're not going to search there, well, I'll give you a quick potted history here. Brains was founded in 1882 by a fella who, believe it or not, had quite close links to the Methodist Church, who at the time, or the Wesleyan Church as they was known back then, and they were advocating a campaign of abstinence, they called it, which basically meant cut down on the drinking, you pissheads. And it transpired that the fella, the Reverend James, I don't know whether he was married to somebody who owned a brewery, but by a quirk of fate, he inherited a brewery. But it wasn't Brains that he inherited. It was the Crown Buckley Brewery. And they were founded in 1767 they were founded. And I think by 1824, that brewery had passed over to him. So he went completely arse about face and started brewing beer. Now, that's not much to do with the Brains Brewery, but it's got a lot to do with the beer. That's where the beer gets its name from. So how did this end up being brewed by SA Brain? Well, in 1882, Brains was founded, and they were based in Cardiff. This lot were based in a place called Llanelli. I don't know whether that's pronounced right. Maybe the little Welsh fella, if he's watching this, can put me right on it. I think it's how it's pronounced, Llanelli. A fucking strange language that. It's like somebody's got a load of Scrabble and just thrown it up in the air. Or someone's cheated at Scrabble and come up with that language, because they've got a severe lack of vowels and a large number of L's. So my theory is that somebody was having a bad day at Scrabble and came up with a Welsh language. If you're Welsh, please don't have a pop at me. It's just a laugh. Calm your tits. But where was I? Yeah, Brains, founded in 1882. Based in Cardiff. In 1997, Brains took over the Crown Buckley Brewery, and they took a couple of things with them from that, i.e. the yeast and the recipe for this stuff. And they reckon that this is the original recipe. They reckon the yeast is Buckley yeast that's brewed with this, as opposed to the Brains yeast that they use for their beers. Which, if that's the case, then they have tried to keep this original. And it says on the label at the top, brewed in honour of the Reverend James Buckley and inspired by an original recipe from 1885. Now, I'm not sure how true to the original recipe that's going to be. I did hear that they stopped using hop pellets and they've started using whole leaf hops in there, which I think is a good thing. And the yeast that they use is the same. It's the original strain of yeast that was used in the Crown Buckley Brewery, which closed in 1997. Now, speaking of breweries closing, Brains really did suffer during the pandemic. And when I say suffer, I mean it came close to, I wouldn't say bankruptcy, but having to close. And the way around this was they didn't sell the pubs. They gave a lease. They sold a lease, a buyback lease. I'll get this right in a minute. They sold a buyback lease to Marston's for 25 years, which meant that Marston's have control of 56 of their pubs for 25 years. However, shortly after, they actually sold, not them, Brains actually sold 99 of their pubs. So they were going through a bit of a hard time. The latest word on that is that the money that was generated, it's gone to improve. Because they opened up this was a complete quirk of fate, and I really do feel for them, and I really hope that nobody was made redundant during this, but they opened up a new brewery in a place called Tremorfa, I think it's pronounced. That's in like a Cardiff sort of suburb, and this brewery was brand spanking new. I think it was opened up by one of the royal family, and again, as I say, the next year when COVID hit, it fucking ruined them. The latest word on that is the money that they've earned from the sale of the lease to Marston's and of the sale of the pubs has allowed them to streamline and diversify their brewing process, which means they can brew more beer, basically. I don't know how they're going to sell their beer, because most of their beer was sold in the pubs that they had. So now most of them have been sold off. Who knows? But they were the biggest brewer in Wales. Not the oldest. That was the Crown Buckley Brewery. But they were the biggest. I'm not sure whether they are or not now. But if you're a rugby fan, you'll have known that the Brains Brewery sponsor the Welsh national side, and they have their fingers in other pies as well. I do remember you can get Brains up here, certainly in London. I've seen it in a few places. Believe it or not, there's a London Welsh Centre, which is based in, is it Gray's Inn Road? I went there to watch England-Wales. That was fun. During the Euros. When was that? It was a few years ago now. My mate's Welsh, he took me down there. My mate Stu. If you're watching, Stu, how you going, geese? We went down there and I was drinking bottles of the Brain stuff, and I have to say it was not bad. I did like it. They didn't do lager down there, it was just selling the Brain stuff, and it was good. I have to say I did quite enjoy their beers. However, haven't had a Brains beer now since that mild, which was okay actually. Got it in Home Bargains, and it's, I don't know, it doesn't pain me, but when I see beers being sold in Home Bargains, it says to me that the brewers aren't making a lot of money out of it, which is a shame. And to see Brains there, then, you know, that does, I wouldn't say it doesn't bode well, but I think I reviewed that during the pandemic, so it does sort of explain why it would be in there, but because they were going through hard times and they needed the cash. But enough doom and gloom. Brains beer. I'm just looking at this Brains. Do you think this is what zombies drink? They love Brains, don't they? Anyway, I'm talking shite as usual. Let's get this open. Let's see what's going on. Right, before we get this open, I'll just give you a little spiel on the back of the label. It's 500ml bottle, it's 4.5%. Fine Ale Revelation, they've called this. Rev James Original. Rev James ales are named in honour of brewing legend Reverend James Buckley, savour of souls and satisfier of thirsts. Brewed with our exclusive Buckley yeast, they each deliver a signature taste with a surprising finish. Okay. Chapter and verse, the Reverend James Original is a rich and well balanced with a mellow malty flavour that unexpectedly gives way to a clean, refreshing finish. Does it indeed? Well, there you go, there's the label. It's in a clear bottle. You know my views on clear bottles. I do find that darker beers in clear bottles don't tend to suffer as much from skunkiness, and that's not saying they don't, but I genuinely find that if they are skunked, you do get a little hint of the aroma of skunkiness. It's certainly never as big as it is in a lighter beer. And sometimes it does affect the taste, sometimes it doesn't. It's weird. I've noticed that in Spitfire quite a bit. And in fact, a lot of the Shepherd Neame beers, Bishop's Finger, etc., Master Brew, Spitfire, as I've just mentioned, all dark beers, all in clear bottles. Sometimes you do get a little bit of a skunky flavour, sometimes you don't. So it's weird. I think the pale beers, you get it a lot more. So there you go. There's that phenomenon. Anyway, let's shut up and let's get this open, see what's going on. Rightio. There's the cap. The Rev James. Yeah, what an irony, eh? Campaigning for abstinence and then inheriting a brewery. What a kick in the teeth. Now, I was going to say, when the Brains Brewery took over the Crown Buckley Brewery, they sold the place off and it's now offices, and there is a bar there, which is some saving grace, but yeah, it's always sad when you see a brewery closing, and a lot of people were made redundant from that as well, which is a shame. There it is in the glass. Yeah, and there is an aroma that comes from these beers, as I was saying, these dark beers in clear bottles, and I get it with Spitfire, and as I say, I get it with the Shepherd Neame beers, and I'm getting it here as well. And it's like a very bitter, grassy, herbal type flavour. It doesn't really, how can I put this? It doesn't really detract from the flavour of the beer, but the aroma is quite a common theme in these, as I say, these dark beers with clear bottles. I don't know why they do that. It's got quite a nice caramel malt, and the bitterness that's on top of it, I suppose, this being a best bitter, that's what it is, I suppose it would add to that. So I'm not really going to knock that kind of aroma and flavour, because sometimes you do get that bitter flavour on there, but I don't class it as an off flavour, which is weird, because obviously in a lager, that type of flavour and aroma, it really, well, you've seen the rants I go into, but I tend to find in certain dark beers, I wouldn't say it enhances it, but it doesn't really, it's not off-putting, it's not an off flavour, if you know what I mean, or an off aroma as well. That's just my personal take. Yeah, and yeah, it's pretty bog standard stuff. The aromas aren't big, to be fair, but anyway, I am gassing. It does look nice, mahogany chestnut type colour, one finger white head. Let's get it down the hatch. Bottoms up. I'm detecting a little bit of brewing syrup in there, and it's reminding me slightly of a Green King beer. Not as prominent. A Green King, they actually absolutely fucking swamp their beers, all of them, with this, I don't know whether it's a signature yeast or a type of brewing syrup that goes in there, but you get the theme running through all their beers, and it does come through on this as well a little bit, not as bad. Yeah, it's like a sweetish, how can I put this? Almost artificial, malty type sweetness. It's not, as I say, it's not as big, but it is there, and it's a little bit off-putting, to be honest. I have to say, the mouthfeel and the head retention is absolutely superb on this. I'm impressed with that, and it's quite full-bodied too. It has got a reasonable amount of hop bitterness, but it's just that, I don't know, yeah, it's that weird brewing syrup that some brewers put into their dark beer, and it's putting me off slightly. Some people might like that. Me personally, I don't really like it, and that's why I think Green King beers are really not good. Now, if you've tried the Abbott Reserve, even the Abbott Ale, Green King IPA, you'll get that flavour that you get in here, and some people might like it. As I say, they probably think it's an enhancement to the malt, but I'm not a fan. In a way, it does remind me a little bit of Old Speckled Hen. I'm really getting them sort of vibes from it. That's really what I'm being reminded of. The Abbott Reserve, maybe a lower ABV version of the Abbott Reserve. That's what I'm getting. Maybe the Abbott Reserve is a little bit more fruity, but this, it's just okay. And to be honest, I wouldn't want to drink too many of these. That would really start to grate on me. That sweetish flavour. It could be yeast, I don't know. But ultimately, it's a sweetness. And it's not a cloying sweetness, I will say that. It's not, don't get me wrong, it's not a sickly, sugary sweetness. As I say, it's Old Speckled Hen. If you like Old Speckled Hen, you'll like that. What are the better, which is the better one out of the two? Probably this, because that flavour I'm talking about isn't as big as it is on the Speckled Hen, but it's not far off. Do I like this beer? I don't know. As a bitter, there are far better bitters out there. There really are. Does it do what a bitter is supposed to do? Not really. It doesn't have that big hoppy finish, the bitter, earthy, musty, peppery hops that you get on good English bitters, like with sort of Challenger and Fuggles hops. Don't get that at all. It's just that malt all the way through with the sweetness on top of it. It's a shame, because this could be a great beer, because the body, the mouthfeel and the head retention on this are fantastic. I mean, that really does look like a nice beer in the glass. It's just slightly let down by that flavour. There is flavour in here, don't get me wrong. Now, you can argue about what's better, no flavour or bad flavours. Well, ideally you want good flavours. That's the fucking bottom line. But that sort of funny, bitter astringency in the aroma has died down a bit, and there isn't really much there at all. I'm not really a fan of this sort of beer. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's just that flavour that's in there. Now, some people may like that. This would really start to annoy me after 2 or 3. In fact, I don't think I could drink 2 or 3 of these. It's just because it's got that that sweetness, that syrupy, brewing, sugary, syrupy type stuff over everything else. I suppose that's where it's getting its flavour from. Is it the yeast that's doing it? Well, if they're saying it's the original recipe, then it could well be the yeast. I don't know. But nah, this would be okay for 1. At a push 2. I couldn't drink any more of that though. It's just not got that moorish flavour that you get from other decent bitters. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had some decent bitters on there. One that I should review, and I drank it because I had nothing else, was the Adnams Southwold bitter. That was really nice. That's a bitter done properly. And then, if you want to experiment a little bit, then that is that type of beer as well. This had a little hint of Belgian yeasty esters that are on there, on them sort of Belgian doubles and stuff like that, and they was coming through on the bitter, which was really nice, I thought. But this, in a blindfold test, if you'd have told me this was a Green King beer, I'd say, yeah, this is typical Green King. And the bottom line is, if you like Old Speckled Hen, you're probably going to like that. I'm not a fan of Speckled Hen, to be honest. So there you go. So what is the verdict on the Rev James original? Well, to be honest, I really don't like giving bad reviews to English brewers. Well, I say English brewers, British brewers, because obviously these are Welsh, especially after they've gone through the hard time that they've just experienced. And, you know, I'd really like to be saying, yeah, come on, support this brewery. They do great stuff. But the dark mild wasn't bad, I have to say. Brain's dark. Quite enjoyed it. I'm a fan of mild, though, so what do you expect? This stuff, as I say, it's one of them beers that some people may like. And if you're, I'm going to say it for the last time, I promise, if you're a fan of Speckled Hen, you're going to like this. I'm not really a fan, so it's not going to get a big mark from me. I think at a push, I'm going to give that 5 out of 10. And it could be great. I know they're saying it's an original recipe and all that, but it could be great. It's got a great mouthfeel. It's got a great body on it, and the head retention, look, that's still there as well. Oh dear, what a shame. I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. I think that's about the best I can do, and this is just personal. I'm not saying it's a bad beer. It's just not to my taste. There may be people out there who like that Green King type of flavour. If you do, you'll love this. In fact, I'd go one further and say this is a bit better than Speckled Hen. It hasn't got that huge sweetish flavour that the old Speckled Hen has. I think it's a bit more toned down, but it's still there. I can still get it. I can sort of recognise that flavour instantly. I'm assuming it's brewing syrup or sugar, one of the two. Not sure. Either that or the yeast, because yeast obviously gives off the esters, can be quite sweet as well. I was reading up the other day on yeast actually. I should really do a video about yeast because it is fucking fascinating. Now I know you're probably thinking, oh, this fucking geeks off again, but the stuff, especially Belgian yeast, that's what I was reading about, and honestly I could have sat there for hours reading about it. It was fucking amazing. The different types of flavours that called esters that come off there, and it's very volatile. Yeast is very volatile. You have to be on top of your game. If you get the formula wrong, if you get the temperatures wrong, if your yeast's got an infection, yeast infection, you're going to get off flavours. Esters that come off yeast really do have a big influence on how a beer will taste. And it's credit to some of the Belgian brewers as well. In fact, it's credit to all brewers who get really good flavours from their yeast, especially in Germany and the United Kingdom and in Belgium especially. You know, I think yeast is such a big factor in the Belgian beers style that I think it does warrant me doing a video about it and just letting you know what sort of flavours you can get from yeast. And you know, people wonder, you know, the big emphasis now is on the hops and stuff like that. Oh, what flavours can you get from hops? Well, yeah, you can get a fair amount of flavours from hops, but yeast is the key ingredient. It's what makes beer, and it can make or break a beer, believe it or not. Well, you don't have to say believe it or not. I imagine you would believe it because, yeah, it is the main ingredient in beer. But there you go. I'm going to give that a 5.5 out of 10, and I really do wish Brains all the best, and I really hope they do overcome their difficulties that they've encountered because of COVID and all that. And I really hope, you know, everyone keeps their jobs. They won't have to make anyone redundant, and they'll just keep on going and selling their beer. But for me, unfortunately, this isn't really to my taste. I would probably buy a pint of it again if there was nothing else, or if it was a guest ale. I wouldn't mind trying this on draft actually, or on cask I should say, on cask, and seeing what it's like. But for me, in the bottle, it's going to be a 5.5 out of 10, and recommended with caution. And remember, beer is working class champagne.